All right, guys, welcome back. Southeastern 14, Blake Lovell here, along with Max Barr. We are talking SEC basketball once again, and this time around, we're talking about the NBA draft deadline has come and gone in terms of players being able to declare for the draft, withdraw to return to school. And Max, as usual, always an eventful time in the SEC because you have a lot of players who have NBA prospects, as we know. And so we're going to talk about kind of the biggest winners and the biggest losers coming out of this whole process. I think you and I are on the same page when it comes to certain teams that did really well getting some guys back. Other teams did not. And you know what? We usually start with the positive. Let's just go ahead and get some of the negative out of the way first, because I think Kentucky is going to be one of the biggest talking points probably of anyone, because they didn't get Oscar Tshiebwe back to start with, right? I mean, that's the most significant part of this. I think we sort of expected that. I thought there was a lot of momentum just based on people I was talking to as we got closer. Pretty much felt like, this was going to be the case. And I think Kentucky pretty much knew that there as well. The Antonio Reeves situation is interesting because he withdraws, right? But
very interesting.
It is interesting because now it's like, well, does he return to Kentucky? We don't know that either. So given, and I think you may have brought this up in a previous video that we did, Kentucky's got open spots, and now you're looking around and wondering how they're going to fill those spots. And when Tshiebwe decides to stay in the draft, don't know what's happening with Reeves as we're recording this on Friday. A lot of unknowns for a Kentucky team that is built around very talented young players. But as we've seen in this kind of day and age, sometimes that doesn't get you where you want to go, especially if you're Kentucky.
Yeah. What I will say about Reeves, very interesting situation. It's not based on NIL. It's not based on money. This is I've talked to some people close with the Kentucky program. This is based on a role in minutes. That's what this is based on. He's not worried about the money. They're also pursuing David Jones pretty hard to fill that kind of same veteran scorer wing presence kind of. It's hard to try to pin it right now because it's so up in the air. Memphis is battling hard with both of those guys. But I think Kentucky definitely a loser of the draft without getting Livingston or Oscar or Reeves telling Kentucky they're coming back. None of them committed back to Kentucky. So I think there's definitely reason to panic, but not as much as I've been seeing. Okay. The 4 spot is locked. Aaron Bradshaw. 4 spot's locked. You got DJ Wagner and Dillingham as your guards. And I don't know who in the transfer portal that could come in right now would play above them. I don't know who Kentucky wants to go out and get. Yeah, Cal, could have been a little bit more aggressive in the transfer portal, but he didn't know what a lot of these guys were doing. I think Kentucky is going to be all right in the long run after we see what's going to happen with Kaluma, what's going to happen with David Jones, with Reeves. There's also been some buzz about Isaiah Miranda, 7-footer. Kentucky might be looking out for. So, yeah, not the best reaction from yesterday's news, but I don't think it's like extreme panic mode that people are talking about.
Well, and you just said it. One of the reasons why is we both talked about, like, let's not act like the class they have coming in is just a bunch of yeah, it's a great class. I mean, it's an elite class, and we're used to that at Kentucky. But specifically, as we've said, we talked about kind of the changing way of college basketball in the transfer era, where you get teams that get a lot older, and we've seen those older teams. Look at last year, right? Like, look at what you can do to be able to make a run in the NCAA tournament, is to have some of those teams that are older, that are carried by veteran type guys. Kentucky, loses their guy like Tshiebwe, who could have been, a guy like that. We talked about Reeves. He's played a lot of minutes in college basketball now, played in Kentucky for a season. We don't know if he's coming back. And so you just open up a lot more questions in that regard, in terms of where are those guys that you feel like we've seen carry a San Diego State, carry a, teams like that, right? To get to those points that they got to. That's what you're looking for, I think, if you're Kentucky, and it's just trying to figure out exactly. We of course we weren't talking about it, but the conversation with Hunter Dickinson and all that. We were thinking, okay, if they can add a guy like this, right, like that, then that helps a lot if Tshiebwe stays in the draft. And so I think it just now opens up a lot more questions. Not for me, and as you said, I think there is some overreaction, but it's Kentucky. I'm willing to understand the overreaction because Kentucky fans have high expectations, as they should, based on what's happened these past several seasons. But I think now it's just trying to figure out, where do you kind of add some of those missing pieces? And it is kind of late in the process now as we're in June. And so I think once we kind of have a better idea, then maybe you can overreact. But I think for now, I mean, we see on paper what they are. I don't think I would put them as the SEC front runner by any means right now. And you and I actually, we haven't talked about this yet. We may kind of look into maybe our way too early preseason rankings for next week. We may try to do something like that. So we'll see where we have Kentucky, because I'm very curious to see where I put them. But that's just kind of where Kentucky is. And I think it's just trying to figure out where they're going to fill some of those spots. And so we'll see what happens with the Cats. I do think that's going to be a very interesting situation to see who else they can bring in for sure. So, all right,
let's talk about with, Coach Cal too. People are upset with him.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and I understand, but with the whole Oscar situation, to start out, his reps gave back Kentucky a huge NIL number, huge, and so Kentucky was like, okay, we're gonna go get Hunter Dickinson. Missed on him, and then had to come back to Oscar, and it was, 50-50 a little bit there, sort of to trend a little bit more towards the NBA as he started working out for team after team, and it kind of, became clear what his decision was going to be. But Cal hasn't just been sitting back lounging like, I feel like Kentucky fans think. Just hold on a little bit and hold the panic for a little bit is all I'm saying.
We're going to have some very interesting discussions about the Kentucky Wildcats in the offseason and going into next season, because in all honesty, Max, it doesn't matter what we say about Kentucky over the next 9 months, because when March hits, that's when we figure out exactly what's going to happen with John Calipari, because Kentucky could go 30-0 during the regular season, but if they don't get out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament and make some sort of run, that's what it comes down to. So I'm very curious to see how the roster shapes up here moving forward for the Cats, who we will talk a lot about here moving forward. So, all right, let's talk about some other teams. Alabama, your reigning SEC champion.
Big day for them.
Yeah, I mean, they ultimately, it all runs together. I don't remember if we talked about this in the previous video. I think we may have touched on it a little bit, but so of course the ones that you expected to stay in the draft stayed in the draft. We knew it was going to happen. Brandon Miller stays in. Noah Clowney stays in. Charles Bediako was kind of that initial one. I think you're like, uh-oh, now that they lost him, they better get these two guards back, because if they don't, then you're like, all right, even though, again, Bediako, much different player at 7 foot, center that could do different things than a Jahvon Quinerly or Mark Sears, but still, as you just alluded to, a huge day, I think, for Alabama to get Quinerly back, to get Mark Sears back, and now to pair them, as I brought up in the transfer rankings video. I had Alabama at 5, in terms of just they didn't have a lot of volume, but I think to have Sears and Quinerly coming back, to pair them with two guys in the backcourt, on the wing, like an Aaron Estrada and a Latrell Wrightsell, you've got 4 guys right there who can play the Nate Oates type of way. And I think that's, and look, those 2 guys, Quinerly and Sears, we're going to say this a lot, played a lot of minutes. They're older, they're experienced guys. And I think that was huge for this Alabama team that does look a little bit different. And your expectations, I don't think, are going to be as high as they were a season ago. But just getting those 2 guys back, that's a huge positive boost to momentum.
Yeah, I think Sears was the more confident between the 2 to come back. I think there was a little bit of, not a ton, but a little bit of, question, does JQ come back or not? Big for them, like you said. And Estrada is a stud. Estrada is very good. I love that backcourt, and I think Rylan Griffin is poised for a breakout here.
Another guy.
I really like Rylan Griffin. The only thing with Alabama is, obviously, you alluded to Bediako leaving. I think that one took me by surprise. I thought he was going to be the anchor of that defense there. But Alabama's currently the front runner to land North Dakota State transfer Grant Nelson. So I don't know if they will land him. I'm not sure, but I know that right now they are in the lead for Nelson. So if they bring in Nelson, it might not be the defensive lockdown that Bediako was, but Nelson might offer you a little bit more offense. Either way, I think I think this Alabama team's in a good spot now, bringing back those 2 guards. JQ, if you're on Twitter, he's been all over the place. He's liking every bad comment about him. He is just on a revenge tour. The
No
guy's
way.
motivated.
No way.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, that's what we've always talked about with him, right? Like and I know opposing fan bases don't love it, but I can remember we were at the SEC tournament this past season, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, every time down the floor, like he's saying something to somebody, but like that's the way he plays, and it worked out for him a lot. So I mean, yeah, I think having that chip on your shoulder coming back, that just kind of fits, I think, his personality, and yeah, I mean, I think he, as you said, I mean, he is someone that is a proven talent in the SEC, and that's what we keep talking about. Yeah, and that's what we talk about, right? If we're trying to figure out how to figure teams that have so many new players, like, and that's the era of the transfer portal. You're trying to figure out how teams are where they're gonna go. Like, what is their ceiling? What is their floor? When you have proven players like this that are all SEC type guys, it makes it easier to at least feel confident about certain things with the team versus maybe a team that's just putting all new pieces in place. And so yeah, I think that was certainly significant for Alabama. And as we keep going down the list here, we can kind of bounce between good and bad, I guess. I mean, there's another one here that certainly I think everyone it's significant because of the team and what they achieved last season. I mean, Kobe Brown not coming back to Missouri, it's a big one. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, Missouri, as I mentioned in our transfer video, I thought they did a pretty good job of bringing in guys that you feel like, Dennis Gates will get the most out of. But I don't know that you're going to compare that class necessarily to the ones that we talked about that we had near the top, like in Arkansas, Ole Miss, Florida, LSU, teams like that. But I mean, look, Kobe Brown had become one of the top players in the SEC. And again, I think there was probably some momentum eventually figuring out he's probably not coming back. And as we keep bringing up, right, like that timeline, I feel like has, what date, right? Guys have to withdraw, but like you do feel like this goes down to like the final minute at times because it's the NIL money that's out there and really trying to understand what kind of deal you could get. So for Kobe Brown not to come back, I mean, for Missouri team that certainly overachieved what expectations were last season, it's not ideal, especially when you look at it's not ideal when you look at what the rest of the roster looks like, right? Because there's a clear, I think, lack in the front court right now, and
lack in the front court.
And for a team that didn't rebound, I mean, they were a bad rebounding team last season. They were a bad defensive team at times, minus the forcing turnovers. And I'm curious to see where they go from here without a Kobe Brown kind of in the mix. So,
yeah, you're right on with a bad defensive team, but forces turnovers. I think this team still has the guards that are going to be feisty and be able to force turnovers, but this front court is not looking like an SEC front court. I don't know how this team's going to protect the rim. They do have a 7-footer coming in, Jordan Butler, but he's outside the top 100 freshman rankings. I'm not sure what impact he's going to have right away. I'd love to be surprised by him. But yeah, Kobe leaving, I mean, that's a big body too. He's like 240. He was that guy that, they had the shooters, but he was their guy to bang. Golston was pretty big too. They lost him, but I think this was trending this way for Missouri. I don't think this is any shock to Missouri fans. But it just needs to be mentioned. This is a big blow for a team. And last year they were 180th Ken Pom defense. They were 9th Ken Pom offense. So this was that's if you want to know how this team won, they just outscored you.
And they made threes.
They made a ton of threes. They had matchup nightmares. So I don't know if this team gets better defensively. I don't know. I have my questions. I have my doubts.
Yep. And, you take out DeMoy Hodge, who forced a lot of steals, or forced a lot of turnovers. And so add that to the mix. Everybody knows we always make the running joke here on the channel about my love for Dennis Gates. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he figures it out. But yeah, it is a roster that I think you're very curious to see how it unfolds there with that. All right, let's talk about some other teams here. Let's talk about Arkansas. I know Arkansas fans have been waiting on this. Devo Davis comes back.
Big time.
I mean, it's huge because everyone knows we've talked about it over the past couple of seasons, how significant of a player he has been, not only that team, just to the program overall, kind of, their ascent and their NCAA tournament success. He steps up in big moments, You need a player like that. I said that in the transfer rankings video. To have him back, I mean, to me, it's one of the biggest decisions because I think you just look at what he brings to that team. And we talked about all the new faces that are there. And to have someone like that who can kind of hold everything together, get everyone on the same page, I think that's invaluable for Muss. And the Muss bus officially gassed up once again with Devo back in the fold. And I just thought that would be on my short list of one of the most impactful decisions, just because I think when you bring him back, and look, we're not surprised that Ellis withdrew. We're not surprised that Tramon Mark withdrew. We pretty much expected those guys to be there, but
yeah,
Davis was the one that we were not sure necessarily about. And of course, Jordan Walsh stayed in, and we can tie that into the conversation. But I thought Davis was the big one, because I think that everything he brings, as we've talked about before, not even in the stat sheet, it's just something you can't really replace, I think, in one off season. So
yeah, and I think between Devo and Walsh, Walsh was much more the expected to stay in the draft. I
yeah,
don't think there was a ton of optimism on returning Walsh. Towards the end there, though, there was a little bit of 50-50, like, does Walsh return? But I think it was just assumption. I think the whole time Walsh had a foot out the door. But yeah, getting Devo back is just massive, especially because of, you know, he knows the Muss culture. You know, you bring in all these guys. Brazil's been there for a year. Makai Mitchell's been there for a year. But like Devo, I feel like he's like Mr. Arkansas. You know, like he is
yeah.
he is gonna be the guy on that team. He's gonna probably should be the captain. So yeah, I think that is probably, besides Oscar leaving, which was a 50-50 thing, I truly think. Like leading up until that last day, I think this is the biggest news of the SEC, Devo coming back. I think this solidifies Arkansas up at the top. Going to be one of the best guards in the nation. I really think so. And a lot of people are upset about Ron Holland not
Yeah.
coming to Arkansas. You know, it goes to G League Ignite. I actually had some pretty solid information 2 days ago. This would be on Wednesday, that Holland was going to be coming to Arkansas. And then a late offer from the G League actually beat out Arkansas. So that recruitment was down to the very last second. But I think the fit with Holland would be kind of weird, because I feel like Brazil is locked in at the 4. I don't think, they really want to play him at the 5. I don't think they do.
Yeah.
You got Fall and Makai there. So Holland is a 4. I guess he could be a big 3 that doesn't have a ton of shooting, but I always felt that the fit with Arkansas and Ron Holland would be a little bit weird with Brazil already being there. So I think, yeah, big success yesterday for Razorbacks.
Yep. Devo officially gets the title of I think he can now officially drive the Muss bus. I think he's been driving for a little while, but he's got the keys once again. So had to hand him over for a little bit. They gave him the keys back. He's ready to drive the bus again. For sure. All right, Tennessee fans, I know some of you said we forgot about you in the transfer rankings. We didn't. We mentioned Tennessee as kind of an honorable mention, but a lot of that was based on numbers too, as we said. I mean, you think about how many guys Arkansas brought in, how many guys Ole Miss, LSU, Florida. Tennessee brought in 3 guys, and we're not knocking the class they brought in. But I would say, and you just said Devo could be perhaps the biggest one in terms of the coming back. I think that Josiah-Jordan James could be right there in that conversation, because he is someone, anyone who's watched our videos know, I've been high on him. I've always said he's kind of that guy that you don't want to call him a glue guy, because he's, I think sometimes people see that as sort of a negative label, but I don't see it that way. I think he is the guy that holds everything together. And I've said many times,
Definitely.
they're better when he's on the floor. And I thought that was the case last year, thought it was the case the year before. And so getting him back, I mean, I think what that did put them over the scholarship limit, I think by 1. We know that stuff gets figured out. But yeah, I mean, Josiah-Jordan James coming back to join, Vescovy, to join Ziegler whenever he's back on the floor. We talked about, Connect coming in and guys like that are joining the mix. Yeah, to me, that was as big as any of them, because I think that, as we always say, in this era, you never really know. You don't have a great feel sometimes about what a guy's going to do. I didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other in what I thought Josiah-Jordan James was going to do, but to actually see, hey, he's coming back. Now you got a 6'7" older guy, versatile wing who can do a little bit of everything and really can help them especially shooting wise, which I'm going to say that about any SEC team. I thought that was a big, big, big win for Rick Barnes and company.
Huge, huge. I had a lot of doubts about Tennessee before James came back. Bart Torvik projects Tennessee as like the number 2 team in the nation right now. And a big reason why is they project them to have the number 1 defense again. Had a number 1 defense last year. And without James, I was like, I don't think this defense is going to repeat. I don't think Connect is all that defensively. I don't think Ledlum's all that defensively. They lose a lot of height. Scratch all that. Scratch it all. James is everything for this defense. Lockdown wing defender. Lockdown wing defender. Can switch defensively. I really like this team now. I'm a little bit worried for Dalton Connect. I feel like he might kind of get lost behind James. James, all 4 years at Tennessee, has played over 25 minutes a game. All 4 years. Never gotten under 25 minutes a game at the 3. So he's not going to get under 25 minutes this year either. So I kind of feel bad for Dalton Connect coming in. I feel like he's going to really be able to add some pop, some shooting off the bench. But yeah, I had Tennessee, kind of as like like I don't really know where this defense is going to go. Scratch it. Love this team now.
Yeah, I will have Tennessee very high when we do our rankings next week. I will tell you that right off the bat. All right, I do have to wrap up here soon, but there's another team I don't want to forget about, and I don't remember if we said this in the previous video, but Tyrin Lawrence returning to Vanderbilt is huge for the Commodores. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Now, when you pair him with Ezra Manjon, you have kind of some of those younger guys that really came along last season. I think that's enough for me to look at Jerry Stackhouse's group now. And like I said before, I thought Jordan Wright was just a big addition for LSU. That's a big loss for Vanderbilt with everything he kind of brought to the table. Of course, Liam Robbins not being there too. They're going to have to figure those kind of things out. And I don't know that they have for sure replacements because you are replacing 2 guys like that again are all SEC type players. But I think now their guard duo is an all SEC guard duo in Manjon and Lawrence. And so to get those 2 back, those were 2 of the most improved guys, I thought in the league, and if not the country last season, those 2 guys specifically.
Definitely.
And when there was a lot of momentum initially, at first I talked to people, I said, look, what's going on with Lawrence? There were a lot of people said, I'd be shocked if he doesn't wind up at Auburn. And now it's like, not only, it's like he doesn't wind up in the NBA, he doesn't wind up at Auburn, he comes back to Vanderbilt. And there was a lot of positive momentum for that over the past week or 2. Yeah, I mean, that is a huge win for Jerry Stackhouse, because if you would have looked at the roster, even with Manjon on there, even with the young guys that are going to improve, if you'd have taken Tyrin Lawrence out of that, Jordan Wright, Liam Robbins, then I would have had a lot more questions. But now I think you can build off of this guard duo, and that can push them much further probably than I would have initially thought, even if they still probably lack the depth that a lot of other teams in front of them currently have. So
this team definitely has an identity now. Yeah, they've got their guard duo. Questions in the front court, yes, but Stackhouse has his guard duo. I'm excited to see games like Alabama, Vanderbilt. How are those guards going to go at it? It's going to be electric. I really think that this was everything for Stackhouse. I think Tyrin Lawrence is going to be one of those extremely high usage guys now. He's going to work through Manjon and Tyrin Lawrence, and front court questions. Not every team is going to have every box checked. I think this is a very, very good start for Vandy.
Yeah. Auburn fans, I don't want to forget about you again. We are kind of in a race against time here, but Auburn getting Jaylin Williams and Johni Broome back.
Johni Broome.
Like Bruce Pearl, congratulations. Like you just won, because getting Broome back, that was the one. And you reacted to it there like it. I mean, what else do we say? Like that.
Season changing.
Yeah, I said someone yesterday, he's an SEC Player of the Year candidate going into next season. 100%. I truly think that. Like there's a lot of good players in the SEC, but I would put Johni Broome right there in terms of probably your top 4 or 5 guys that probably are going to be leading the way in terms of SEC Player of the Year candidates next season.
100%.
Yeah. So Auburn, another team.
Quick, to show you how big he is for this team. I love my analytics. Bart Torvik projections with Johni Broome, top 40 team in the country. Without Johni Broome, outside the top 75.
Wow. So there you go. I mean, look, the guy, he averaged what, 14 or 15 points, almost 8.5 rebounds. So like he is a guy that could average a double-double this season in the SEC. And we don't see a lot of guys. Oscar Tshiebwe did it, but like we don't see a lot of guys that come through that do that. And I truly think he's got a really good chance to do it this season. But Jaylin Williams, someone else I would not, overlook either. And you and I certainly don't. But like Jaylin Williams, I think, has always been kind of one of those underrated guys. You can use him in a variety of. Yeah, and look, Auburn's three-point shooting is going to improve based on the transfers they've got coming in, with Denver Jones and Johnson and those guys. So you add that to the mix, you get these guys back, having this front court now kind of rebuilt. Dylan Cardwell comes back. He'll give them more minutes, I think, as a 6'11" guy. So getting your front court back for Auburn, I just thought was so big for Bruce Pearl because I think he's got, again, you got to replace Wendell Green and such, but Denver Jones coming in and those guys, I'm pretty impressed now with Auburn. I'm curious to see where I put them next week, kind of in our early rankings. We did mention Matthew Morrell in the previous episode coming back to Ole Miss, so we're not going to touch on that here, but we talked kind of a lot about that, even though it was a transfer rankings video. That was a big one for Chris Beard and company to get him back as well. So, all right, Max, anything else you want to kind of wrap up with real quick? Like I said, we apologize for kind of rushing this one towards the end, but we are kind of on the time crunch. So anything else before we wrap up, Max?
No, all I want to say is Kentucky fans, just put on the brake. Put on the brakes. All right? Cal's going to work something out. All right? Just put on the brakes.
You heard it here first from Max Barr. Kentucky is going to get it figured out. So
they will.
Don't worry, Kentucky fans. You can come back and comment on this video in 6 months if Kentucky is 7-18 and last place.
I'll wear it right here.
He'll do it. So, all right. We appreciate you guys as always. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. A lot more SEC basketball stuff on the way with Max and I. And of course, we're doing a lot of football stuff. We really jumpstart our football stuff next week. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. A lot of baseball covering the regionals into the College World Series. So we appreciate you guys as always. Hit subscribe and we will talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.